there's so much that I wish I would have known. We were very lucky because, like I said, my mom was in the healthcare space. So she knew how to advocate for him in a way that a lot of people don't know how to advocate for themselves in our healthcare systems. I think about some of the advances that we've made in sarcoma, and I think, damn, why didn't we do that 20 years ago? Like, why were we so much slower on this? But it's sort of easy to say, oh, I wish I would have done something differently. But I think I did what I knew how to do and what I was capable of doing at the time. I was there for him. And I think for a lot of young people, that's sort of what they need.
I've interviewed people who have recovered from sarcoma, who are going through treatment currently, and I've interviewed moms. And so you coming along as a sibling is like I wasn't even thinking about that. So I'm really
Mhm.
interested in hearing about it. So um just to get us started, can you just introduce like to whoever's watching like who you are, what you do, um and anything else you think is important to share about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name's Alison Silberman. I'm the CEO of Stupid Cancer. We're a national nonprofit that supports adolescents and young adults with cancer. And I come to this space with a personal experience in caregiving for my younger brother, who was a 24-year-old Ewing sarcoma patient about almost 20 years ago now.
Okay. Great. Great. And so that was a long time ago. And can you just talk about your brother, who he was before sarcoma?
Sure. Well, his name was Bobby. Bobby and I went to college together. We were very close. And he, like my sister and myself, moved to New York after college and was living in the city. He was an athlete. He played a lot of different sports, hockey, lacrosse, running. Um, and he had just started his career here in New York in advertising, and was thinking about going to grad school when he was diagnosed. But he was really funny, a deeply loyal person, managed to transcend all different types of friend groups in college and had so many different types of friends, friend groups in New York when he lived here. Um, yeah, that's a little bit about him.
Do you have like so you said he was particularly funny. Do you have like an anecdote that you feel like really encapsulates like his personality at all from when you guys were younger?
Um, oh my God, there are so many and probably some that are inappropriate for a podcast. But I always think about how uh and I think this sort of speaks to like a little bit of his a little bit of his personality, a little bit of how much people loved him. When he was first diagnosed, I signed up to run a marathon and raise money for Livestrong back in 2006. And I had just graduated from grad school, so I was like dead broke, beyond broke. And I was thinking, oh my God, how am I ever going to, like, the sums of money that I'm asking for people just seem so outrageous. I was trying to raise $5,000. And and a few weeks into it, I had raised about 20,000, and I was sitting at the computer checking um my fundraising page, and I said sort of jokingly to Bobby, "Oh my God, people love me. I've raised so much money." And he looked at me and he said, "No, Allie, people love me." And he was right. I mean, the people that were donating money were just like people that were trying to support him. So it was sort of that kind of snarky attitude that he had. Um, but yeah, and then just sort of, he was a practical joker, loved playing tricks on people and playing jokes on people. And, he could take it as much as he could dish it. So he was just a fun person to be around.
Got it. Okay, so he was going to go to grad school, and I apologize if you'd already kind of said, but was there a specific plan for what you wanted to do?
He was thinking about going, he started looking at different engineering programs around the time he was diagnosed. So never actually got into applying or started the process, but it was sort of part of his longer term plan that was interrupted by cancer.
Got it. Okay, so he's looking around, trying to pursue. engineering, and then he gets this diagnosis. But I'm sure there's always a build up to getting diagnosed. So,
Mhm.
what happened before all that?
Well, like many young people, he saw all the specialists under the sun. He had been complaining about a leg pain in his left leg for a while, and it had been getting progressively worse. And like I said, he was really active. He was an athlete, so we all kind of chalked it up to, oh, it's an injury or it's, some sort of sport related. So we saw a lot of different um specialists. He had actually just upped his insurance strangely, thinking that it was some sort of an orthopedic problem and he might have to have surgery. And so, as a 24-year-old, you have like the cheapest, worst insurance possible. This is all pre-ACA too. So he had just upped it thinking, well, I might have surgery. I need better coverage. Um, Saw a bunch of different specialists, and it got to the point where he couldn't walk up and down stairs. He was in excruciating pain, and eventually went to see an oncologist who had diagnosed him. He had stage 4 Ewing, so it was all over, but his primary uh, tumor was in his femur, in his left femur.
And just to give me an idea, I know you told me the age, but like what year is this? If you don't mind me asking.
This is 2006.
6. Okay, so we're pretty
Mhm.
early on in, like, sarcoma research and all of
Yes.
that. Okay, yes, that does change the landscape a bit because 'cause we've got some more options now, and there people are
Hmm.
slightly more aware, but, we're still getting
Yeah.
there. So, yeah. So,
Yeah, I
okay,
mean,
so he
and that was part of the problem. It was so it's a very different landscape in many ways now for AYAs and particularly in the sarcoma space, but there weren't a ton of options for him.
No, no, and also, like, I've said this before on, either at least 1 or 2 other episodes, but sarcoma doesn't even sound like a cancer. Like, there's breast cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid cancer, like, skin cancer, and then you come
Yeah.
across Ewing sarcoma, and it's like, "What?"
Where do I
And,
put that?
was that his reaction at all?
Um, it's interesting because my mother was a nurse. And so she was already sort of in the healthcare space. She worked in a hospital, and she knew a lot of the doctors that my brother had been seeing. And so when we found out he had to see an oncologist, when that came across, the next step is seeing an oncologist, she immediately grasped the gravity of it in a way that I think he couldn't, and I knew that I couldn't. I was like, well, that's all right. That's another specialist. Like, let's see. But, I think what we know now is that when you see an oncologist, it's probably the last specialist you're seeing.
Oh, yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, so I think I think it was surprising. I think he eventually sort of came around to the, oh God, this is not good moment. Um, and particularly because my mom was so clued into just how bad it was in a way that that we don't think about 24-year-olds having cancer.
No. No, no, we don't.
Yeah.
So, okay, so 24 years old, he has stage 4 Ewing sarcoma, which is not, at the time, there were not a lot of specialists. And what was treatment like for him, especially around like 2006?
So his protocol was written by two different institutions, one at Sloan Kettering, or one doctor at Sloan Kettering and one at Dana Farber. So he was seen by both a pediatric and an adult, um, both pediatric and adult oncologists who sort of worked together to create his protocol. He had a pediatric cancer, but was an adult. So he was
Yep.
in that sort of purgatory of, we're not really sure where to put you. Um, he went through 17 rounds of chemo. He had 34 rounds of radiation. He went to Vanderbilt for a clinical trial. Um, he, did all the things. And it really didn't, it sort of backed off the cancer for a little bit, but he went through about 18 months of treatment before he died.
And through those 18 months, what was your position in a lot of it? Because I'm assuming you were also young at that time. Can I assume that you were young at the time too? Like, did
Yes.
I like? Okay, I just
I was
want to.
20 years younger.
Okay, so okay, how? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so we were very close. There was about a 2.5 year age difference between the two of us. And like I said before, we went to college at the same place. Um, so I sort of lived in a little bit of a fantasy world of he's just a healthy kid with a bad bout of cancer. And that was sort of my defense mechanism kicking in, thinking like, we're going to get through this. Like there is a light at the end of this tunnel. I was also living in New York at the time. And then once I graduated from grad school, had moved home. He had to move home for care. He couldn't, live in an apartment with three other guys anymore and couldn't live in the fifth floor walk up. So he moved back home to my parents' house, and I followed a few months later to help out. Um, I'd go sit with him, and during his infusions, we would sneak our dog into the hospital so he would have some company. She was very small; she fit in
Nice.
a bag.
Right.
Um,
Okay. I was
yeah,
assuming because that would be I don't know that'd be hard otherwise.
yeah. It was not like a lab; it was like a little Bichon. She was very cute. She popped into a bag. Um,
Yeah.
I sat with him during those trips. I'd visit him when he was in his clinical trial. Um, I really tried to sort of just be another person around. When you're 24 and you have to move back home and live with your parents. It's not the ideal situation when you're already out on your own. Um,
No.
so so I was just there to kind of spend time with him and help out and, be another extra set of hands. So I was commuting into the city and living at home with him while he was in it throughout his treatment.
Did he continue to be funny throughout his like treatment? Like, did he continue to have that kind of like light about him?
Yes, and he was very optimistic. Um, And he, I think for him, and certainly we see this with a lot of AYAs, is that he didn't want to be that burden on anybody, whether it was us, his family, or his friends who really stepped up and, showed up for him and took him out. And, he was still hanging out with his friends. It wasn't like he was completely isolated from his life, but he could tell the difference that like, I'm the sick kid and some people talk to me a little bit differently. And um, but, he still remained really optimistic and really, thoughtful and funny and, really, really wanted to maintain as much normalcy, whatever that means, as he could during his treatment.
Did that the way that he responded with such optimism and he continued to kind of like have that light, did that impact the way you saw the situation, you think? Like, okay, well, this is going to get better because he's like continuing to have his usual personality about him? Or did you yourself see like micro differences in the way maybe his tone was, or any words that were delivered or anything like that?
Um, I don't know if it was his optimism or it was just my need to really believe that everything was gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to tell. I mean, I think he was very pragmatic and very realistic about probably more so than I was about his prognosis. Um, one of the doctors said to him in his diagnosis that he had a 20% chance of survival. And I thought, oh, that's great. 20%, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Which is a terrible number,
Yeah,
especially
that's a
when you're
bad
24.
number.
But yeah. But I thought, well, it's better than 19 or 18. So, I sort of I think I just really wanted to believe that it was going to be okay. And I think because he was very logical and very smart and very thoughtful about how he approached his treatment, that it just felt like, okay, we're in good hands. We're doing the right thing. Like he feels okay about it. I feel okay about it. Um, And I admittedly was, looking at it through rose-colored glasses. Like I know that he was in a lot of pain, and I know it took a real mental toll on him. Um, but again, I thought like this is just part of the process.
And was there a moment where you started to realize, "Ooh, like the 20% doesn't seem so great as a number anymore?"
Honestly, I don't think it was until the very, very end. Um, I think about when hospice came in. And, back then I hadn't been in the nonprofit space. So I know, when we talk about palliative care, it's not necessarily like end of life. It's comfort.
Right.
Um, we had palliative care come in, and and then we had hospice care come in, and I remember the nurse saying to us, his organs are starting to fail, like this will be soon. And I just remember thinking like, oh, get out of my house. Like, how dare you? Like it almost felt like this curse that she was bringing. Like I, again, um, I was so convinced that he was going to beat it. So yeah,
And
I
then it
think
was
probably like the very end.
and the very end was just when they started to move along with the hospice
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. And even in those, moments, um, how was his, like, I mean, he's in hospice, but, like, how was
Yeah.
his demeanor, you know?
Um, I think he was in a lot of pain. He wasn't necessarily sad. I think he was accepting.
Mm.
Um, I think he was probably in a much better place than any of us were. Excuse me.
No, it's okay.
But, I
So
think he understood it in a way I think, none of us could, or maybe none of us wanted to. Which is
yeah,
probably more likely.
yeah. No, it's, uh, I'll just briefly I don't usually like to share too much about my own stuff, but was hospitalized for a while, and I had a 2% chance of survival. I almost died. And I was like so close that I was having like visions when I was in a coma.
Oh my
And
goodness.
just to let you know, it's a lot more peaceful than it
Well, that's
looks like
nice
from
to
the
know.
outside. It's very the reason why people start to accept, I think, I don't know the research behind this. I can only say from my own experience, is you start to feel like, oh, it's actually not that bad. Even though
Mhm,
from the outside you're like, "Oh my god," like, "I cannot believe that this is, like, happening." For that person, in a weird way, there's this stillness that is, like, comforting, and so
mhm.
just to let you know that I maybe he had a different experience, but if he was very accepting of it, I just wanna let you know that's, from someone who's been almost on the other side.
Thank you for
It's
sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Um, so okay, so he passed away
Yep.
and and I'm sure you guys went through all the necessary logistics, everything you had to do, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of wondering, like as you go throughout life, later on, hindsight's 2020. So you look back and you think about things. Was there anything that like you looked back at that experience on and thought, I see that differently now as somebody who's older, has more experience, who, well, now is very supportive of the AYA community. Was there anything that came up for you that, whether good or bad, that made you reframe the experience as someone who's older?
Oh, that's a big question. I think, you know, part of it is now that I'm in this space, there's so much that I wish I would have known. Um, we were very lucky because, like I said, my mom was in the healthcare space, so she knew how to advocate for him in a way that a lot of people don't know how to advocate for themselves in our healthcare system. So, we were really fortunate in that way. Um, but particularly around I think about some of the advances that we've made in sarcoma, and I think, damn, why didn't we do that 20 years ago? Like, why were we so much slower on this? But I think like I think it's sort of easy to say, oh, I wish I would have done something differently. But I think you know, I did what I knew how to do and what I was capable of doing at the time. Um, I was there for him. And I think for a lot of young people, that's sort of what they need. I wish he had been able to find more young people to connect with
Yeah.
um, at the time who had cancer, not just his friend group who were amazing, but if there were more younger people who he could find that sort of sense of understanding and community, I think that would have been really good for him.
Yeah.
But at the time, what did I know?
No, I think it's just you use what tools are available to you, and
Yeah,
that's all you have. I mean, um it's really easy to look back and be like, "Well, I could have done this," but then it's like, "But could you? Could you have done
right.
that?" Like, there's so many other things going on that it's like you almost don't give yourself enough credit for like how much negative things were going on and how much you're able to do at that moment. And which kind of brings me to, topic of, patients with sarcoma. I always feel weird saying patients with sarcoma because like I've heard from people saying I don't like being called a patient, and I totally get that. So say like people with sarcoma or have had sarcoma, um being that a lot of them are so young in getting this type of cancer. I mean, really anybody who gets this kind of cancer, you are at the supposed to be at the peak of like your career. You're dependent upon. You are a new adult. You are like culturally, you are to be depended on. And for rare cancers, not just sarcoma, because like I don't want to like dub sarcoma as the rare cancer because there's like a lot of rare
There's a
cancers,
lot of
but
them.
there's a lot of them, and people don't even realize it. Being able to find support that's like online's great, but also we're all in the conversation of how great really is it. Finding that kind of support is so difficult from what I've heard from other people, and at the same time, you're supposed to be the strong one, whatever that means, like
Right.
physically, mentally, financially, educationally, and all of that. Which kind of spills into your work that you're doing now. And
Mhm.
so um, that's a comment that I hope that you respond to in a second, but I also, as I'm saying this, I wanna ask, like, did your brother's experience actually influence what you do today?
Oh, absolutely. So I started my career in public service. I'd worked for the government, I'd worked in the Senate, and had at the time of his diagnosis, I was in grad school. I was getting a master's in urban planning. So my plan was to work in government, work in public service. And I had I then worked for Mayor Bloomberg's office here in New York City. And throughout his illness and then grieving his death. And it just didn't feel like the right place for me. I believe in public service and I really loved the idea of public service, but it just wasn't the right thing. And then I had, consequently met my now husband through this community, through the Livestrong community. He is also an AYA cancer survivor. Um, I moved to DC to be with him, and I got into the nonprofit space, and it just felt like, oh, right, this is the way I want to give back. I did some lobbying for ovarian cancer through life and all the things that happened. We moved back to New York. And about 7 years ago, this position opened up here, and it just felt like the perfect alignment with my experience as a caregiver to my younger brother. And just really being in the cancer space felt really important to me. Um, and it's amazing how much has happened over the past 20 years, or I guess at the time it was about 13 years from when he was diagnosed to when I took the job. in sarcoma, in AYA space, and cancer in general. But obviously, I still think there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. What to you has been the progress that you've seen, especially for AYA um people?
That we're even talking about it is pretty amazing. Like I said before, Bobby was sort of in this purgatory. There were cartoons on the wall in one hospital, or he was, younger by decades in the waiting room at another hospital. So the fact that our healthcare system is starting to talk about it, our federal regulatory agencies are starting to talk about um, younger people under 50 being diagnosed with cancer. I think that's really started to shift our perspective. Um, for all of the reasons that you said before, we need to start acknowledging the unique experience of younger people as their contribution to their families, to society, to their jobs, and what having a cancer diagnosis does to that. So that's a huge shift in the past 20 years. And then start some of the conversations and some of the research around how it's different for AYAs, whether it's disease specific in the biologies of the disease or it's the psychosocial survivorship piece.
Yeah. And what do you I have my own thoughts on what I think is most difficult for AYA patients, but since you really work solely in this space, what's most difficult for these people who AYA and get cancer just in general?
I'd love to hear what you think. I
Really?
think
Okay.
if I think it depends. I mean, we're talking about people who are diagnosed between the ages of 15 and 39. So those developmental stages are so varied, and everyone's circumstances are different. I think, sort of a cop out of an answer would be um, just recognition of the impact of cancer on those developmental stages. But I think it's hard to say what some of the impact that I see that is so meaningful is being with other AYAs. So that's sort of what is, I think, what we need to be better at.
Hmm.
Um, and going back to what you said before, being better at bringing people together in person, I think is really significant. It's great that we can do this and that we can be on camera and use computers and talk to people on the other side of the country. And there's a huge value in that, particularly in this community that is so isolated. But the ability to be in person with another AYA is so huge. And we see it all the time when two people who have been talking over Zoom for a year meet in person, and all of a sudden it changes their trajectory. It changes, I mean, their shoulders drop, the smiles get bigger. It's a totally different experience.
Yeah, I think, be really interesting is if there was ever a recording or like a documentary about people from the AYA community or like even the rare cancer AYA space meeting for the first time after being on line for so long and seeing like the impact of like the connection between the two.
Hmm.
TM trademark. But
I'll be crying my eyes out.
I know. I think that's just a great idea. My thought is so, okay, I read this fact a really long time ago, so I don't have a citation for it, but I'm just going to say it anyways because I'll probably not say it exactly correctly. There is this idea that the most significant pain somebody can feel is um, not just hope, but believing that something's gonna happen. So, like, the ultimate, like, "Yep, and then I'm gonna do this, and then this is gonna happen," or whatever, and things can change, and, like we know life doesn't go as planned, you make a plan,
Yeah.
God laughs kind of thing. But the hope that things are gonna continue, and,
Mhm.
especially when you're at the peak of, adulthood, and I know the age range of AYA is really big. It's like 15, or what you said is like 39, which to me is
Mhm.
like bizarre, but that's what it is. A lot of people I've talked to are in their late 20s and 30s. And I think that's right at the moment when you're about to start your career, or even when you get into your 40s and you feel like you're finally, I'm not in my 40s yet, but I'm just assuming based off of talking to people who are in their 40s, you are really establishing your career and all that. And to have something like cancer come in and just put in a huge stab of doubt, especially if it's something like sarcoma that doesn't have a lot of research, doesn't have a lot of
Mhm.
like promising funding and stuff like that, is the most gut wrenching, like, but I was gonna do all these things, and I had planned years upon years of doing this. Some people have changed trajectory, but I was talking to somebody recently who was like, "I planned on doing a professional sport, and then one and I was there. I was almost there. I was gonna go play my first game, or I think it was
Mhm.
something like that, leg amputation. I
Yeah.
played soccer." And it's like, and then you look around and you're trying to think, is like, like, yeah, like you're the sick kid. But and then you have people around you your friends and your family who can support you and all of that, but they don't know exactly what you need. And there's especially like, even if you do have people in your family who are um medically literate, like nurses, doctors, etc. Um, there's a there's still a disconnect because they're not the ones in the chair. They're not the ones who have to go and sit alongside people who are like 40 years older than you, like receiving, maybe the same or different cancer treatment. It doesn't really matter to them. They're just sitting in the chair receiving, chemo,
Mhm.
or sitting alongside people who are 20 years younger than you. And you're like,
Mhm.
what do it's like, that in and of itself is, I don't even belong here, you know? Like, I don't belong there, I don't belong here, I can't find a support group, and it's nice to have all this support from family and friends, but, like, who can I go to be like, "Man, did you get, like, this toxicity? Because this one sucks," just, like, conversations like that, or, like, you know, um I don't know, I've even heard people trying to even just, like, joke about it, to be, like, lighthearted about it, and it's like, when you're on the outside, it's like, "Oh, is this okay to joke about?" Like,
Right.
but it's like, that can be really relieving for people, and so it's like, so my response is, like, I think the hardest thing is you are just, and again, I talk a lot about sarcoma because this is for sarc, but, like,
Mhm.
you are stopped at a point in your life that is supposed to be, that culturally is supposed to be very pivotal, and then you're hit with this and you're alone. I mean, really,
Mhm.
you are. You're alone, and you can find people online, but as we know, it's not like grabbing actual coffee with somebody or
Right.
whatever. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that isolation is real, and, it's not just the physical isolation, but the emotional isolation, and missing out, all of a sudden your plans are set on fire and things don't look the way that you thought they were going to look. And I think that that's true for caregivers too. When you think about, I mean, I could certainly say from my perspective, but even parents, you have certain expectations or visions for your kid and hopes and dreams, and cancer's probably not one of them. So,
Probably not.
the entire community is sort of thrown on its axis because this wasn't the plan, and you have to
Right.
now reconcile that and sort of revision what that plan is. I think that's really hard, and it's hard to find other people who truly understand that, like you were saying, because so many AYAs are treated in community settings or under-resourced settings, that there aren't a lot of other AYAs around them to be like, "Hey, this wasn't what my life was supposed to look like, right?"
Yeah. No, exactly. And also, even if you do um survive cancer, your life is still different because of it
Mhm.
changes your body, changes your perspective on things. Um I mean, like, I don't know, for me, I didn't have cancer, I had something else, but, like, I lived in fear for so long because I was like, "Oh, like, what if I get that again?" You know, like, it's you don't know what's gonna happen, and so you have to develop a sort of mentality around it of just, like, all I can do is take care of my ship, and hopefully that when I get into a storm, I can manage it as well as I can. But, with stupid cancer right now, um what's your guys' next plan? Like, do you have a next plan that you're open to sharing? Unless it's private,
What's
that's okay
coming?
too. Yeah, what's
Well,
coming?
so we have a couple things. We of course have our regular bread and butter programs to create connections and build community and provide that age appropriate information for people. So, we're not our finances aren't focused on retirement, but it's on focused on paying for cancer. So we continue to do that, and we will always continue to meet the community where their needs are. Um, we are we have launched an advocacy initiative. We most recently went and visited with a bunch of our congressional friends in DC to advocate for the creation of some CDC guidance specific to AYA services. We're hoping that gets into some appropriations language. We'll see. We'll see in the coming months if it did. But the idea is really to start elevating this and getting some mandates around um, what needs to happen for AYAs and how the healthcare community should be working towards supporting AYAs and AYA support services. So that's sort of our next big thing. We also have a project that we're working on to help better support healthcare providers in the AYA space and give patients and providers some shared language to talk about all of these issues that are happening in this time and they're in this stage of their lives, whether it's fertility conversations or mental health conversations or finances, just to be able to say very easily, like, these are topics that this age group needs to know about, and the conversations are different. Here are the resources to help support that. So those are sort of our two big initiatives that we're pushing forward this year and in the coming years, as well as our signature event, CancerCon, which kind of speaks to that, like bringing people together in person and really you know highlighting the importance of seeing and touching and feeling and hugging people in real life. So that's actually next May in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, c can I come?
Yes,
Okay,
Of
great,
course
cool.
you
Because
can.
I live in Chicago. I would love to that just
Yeah,
sounds like such a great time. Okay, cool. I'll put it on my ca I mean, I don't know which date it is, but
May
May, you
7th.
said, okay. May
Yes,
7th. Okay, I
hold the
got you. I
date.
got you.
May 7th,
Okay,
the weekend of May
okay,
7th.
okay. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't put you on the spot because we're
No,
recording,
not
but
at all. Of course,
okay,
yes. I mean, it's a conference for everyone in the community. So patients, survivors, caregivers, professionals working in the space. We have
okay.
sessions for all of those different audiences. But really, it's such an amazing, invigorating, um, magical weekend to bring everybody together.
No,
So
that's
yes,
great.
you are welcome.
And then
All are welcome.
well, yes, thank you. And I have to ask. I see the little duck behind you, and I'm just wondering if you could please showcase it. And
Of course.
and I also see a photo. Is that's not? Oh,
Yes,
is
that is
that?
my brother. That's actually a better picture of him. That's my brother. um, on a failed fishing trip in a rainstorm.
It's
Um,
okay.
yes, and that's the two of us from many, many years ago, much
Get
younger
it?
days.
Okay.
But
I only saw that we took
th-
the duck down, so that's great to
yes,
see a photo of him. And then the duck. All right. Can you please
and then this is
explain the
Flip.
duck?
So
Th-
Flip
That's
is
his official name.
his name is Flip. He's Flipping Cancer the bird, and he's our mascot. So he's on all of our materials. He comes and visits. So he's our little guy.
And, how did Flip come around?
Flip predates me, but he is yeah, he was just created as, Stupid Cancer was sort of created as this the snarky response to the healthcare community and, the sort of, staid, boring kind of cancer treatment, and this is how you should approach cancer survivorship. We're a little bit more reverent and a little bit more honest. We talk about the things that people don't want to talk about that might be a little embarrassing. And so we're really just about being really open. And, sometimes it sucks and sometimes you laugh at the dark humor and all of it's
Yeah.
okay. And so Flip is sort of that like, we're just flipping Cancer the bird.
You know what it reminds me, you know what, an idea, and I won't trademark this idea, but, so in cardiology, when people get, I don't know what type of surgery, they get the big heart that's a pillow. And
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
wondering, I know you can't, ideally you'd create like a whole other hospital that's not peds and that's not, adult, but it's for AYA, but that's a huge, take on. But I think a lot of AYA patients wouldn't mind hugging Flip,
Yeah.
while they're going through. I mean, hey, like I I'd love a flip, like if I'm, ever in that, I'm not even going through cancer and I would love a flip. So,
Yeah.
that would be really interesting, but I feel like, what's really interesting is, I know that predates you, but that seems something like Bobby would really like, right?
I think he would have. Yes, I definitely think he would
Yeah.
have. Yeah, we used to sell Flip. He's now out of stock, but we are looking for new distributors for him because he is well loved.
I the first time I saw him, I loved him. I think it's great.
Thank
Um
you.
But yeah, and I guess for kind of, so I know that you are doing, stupid cancer and it's focused on AYA and all of that, but kind of just because we're kind of coming to the end, and I kind of want to kind of go back to Bobby for a second because he was AYA, he had a rare
Mhm.
cancer, he had Ewing sarcoma, um, and as a caregiver, and I know you were young, but I think that's really important for, I mean, who knows, really young people might be listening to this. Is there any like advice that you would give to them, watching, helping, supporting their sibling or anybody that feels like a sibling to them?
Yes, I would say, and this is a do as I say, not as I do kind of a situation, but um, take time for yourself. You're a better caregiver when you're cared for yourself, and whether that's letting your friends care for you in certain moments or um, finding other caregivers who are going through what you're going through. The value of connection, it was certainly lost on me, and I think it's lost on a lot of people in this space, but it is so important and can really have such positive impacts. Um, Watching somebody that you love go through something awful and traumatic is heart-wrenching, and it is traumatic for yourself, and I think, as caregivers, we think, "Well, I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with the pain or the challenge when this is over." Um, but it doesn't go away, and it doesn't really leave you that easily. So I would say for any other sibling or close friend who is caring for a loved one with any type of traumatic disease, make sure that you're taking care of yourself too. Um, I think I think it would have made me a better caregiver, or just probably more pleasant to be around. Um, yeah, I think that's probably my one piece of advice.
And I guess, sorry, I do have one more thing.
Okay.
Um, um, when you were having a hard time, what kind of advice would Bobby say? Because I feel like he sounds like he's a pretty great, fun, intuitive kind of guy. What do you think his advice would be?
I think he would probably just tell me to chill out. Just like take a break. Go away. Probably tell me to go away. Um, Yeah, I think he probably recognized the stress that we were all under in a way that we weren't able to recognize in ourselves, and he sort of would backpedal a little bit or sort of, downplay, which isn't what I would have wanted, right? I would have wanted him to be like, "Yeah, I feel shitty, but you can go for a run or go hang out with your friends or do whatever, read a book. It's okay."
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Um, well, first off, thank you for talking about this because I know it's probably very, very hard to talk about. It doesn't matter how many years go by. It's like it's probably still feels like it was yesterday. And
Yeah.
I bet you anything stupid cancer is at least partly successful because Bobby's up there, you know, given the flip, to cancer
Yes.
too. So,
Help
I
us
think
us
he
out.
lives within flip. So, I think this is great, and I really appreciate you sharing your story about Bobby, your experience, and, what's to come with stupid cancer and what it's all about. So, I really
Mm.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you, and thanks for taking the time. It was great to chat.
Yeah, no, thank you. You too.